It is February 4th, 1983. In a quiet house in Downey, California, the morning unfolds in heavy silence. Sunlight filters through the curtains of a room where a 32-year-old woman lies motionless. Her body weighs barely 90 pounds. Her heart, weakened by years of abuse, has stopped. Karen Carpenter, the voice that captivated millions, has ceased to breathe. The paramedics arrive. It's too late. In the following weeks, the world will discover a word many had never heard before: anorexia nervosa. Karen's death will not only be a personal tragedy, it will be the start of a global conversation about an invisible illness that kills silently. Let's go back 11 years. It's 1972. The Carpenters are dominating the charts. Their song, Top of the World, is playing on every radio, at every party, in every American home. Karen is behind the drums, with a smile that looks like it came straight out of a TV commercial. Her voice is like liquid velvet, warm, precise, impossibly beautiful. Richard, his older brother, plays the piano. Together they are the definition of 1970s American success: clean, talented, lovable. They sell millions of records. They win Grammy Awards. They appear on national television. They are the soundtrack to a generation seeking refuge in soft melodies after the turbulent 1960s. But behind that impeccable image, something begins to break down. 1973. During a performance at the Sahara Tahoe Casino, a critic writes a review of the show. The words are positive, except for one detail. He mentions that Karen looks plump. It's a single word in an ocean of praise. But for Karen, that word becomes a scream that drowns out everything else. She reads the review in her dressing room. Her hands tremble. Despite the dozens of comments praising her exceptional voice and undeniable talent, all she sees is that one word: chubby. Something stirs in her mind. A cruel voice that will never leave her. She starts counting calories. She starts weighing herself obsessively. She starts looking in the mirror for flaws that no one else sees. To understand Karen, we must go back even further. She was born on March 2nd, 1950, in New Haven, Connecticut. Her family was typically suburban, middle class, with traditional values and modest ambitions. Agnes, her mother, was a pragmatic woman with rigid expectations. Harold, her father, was a quiet printer who preferred to stay out of the spotlight. From a young age, Karen has lived in Richard's shadow. He's the prodigy. He's played piano since childhood. He's academically brilliant, and he receives all of his mother's attention. Karen is the other daughter. Nice, but without any special spark. Or so they think. In 1963, the family moved to Downey, California, seeking better opportunities for Richard and his music career. Karen was 13 years old. She was sociable and cheerful, but something inside her desperately craved validation, especially from Agnes, who was never effusive with affection. At Downey High School, Karen joins the school band. She's assigned the glockenspiel, a metal instrument no one wants to play. But Karen discovers something more interesting: the drums. The band director, nervous about having a girl on that masculine instrument, gives in to her enthusiasm. Karen turns out to be an exceptional drummer. She has natural rhythm, power, and technique. But there's something more, something no one expects: her voice. When she sings for the first time in rehearsal, silence fills the room. It's a unique voice, deep for a woman, rich in nuances, and perfectly in tune. Richard listens and understands immediately. They have something special, something that could turn to gold. 1969. Karen is 19 years old. After a few attempts with other groups, Richard convinces Karen to form a duo, the Carpenters. They get an audition with A&M Records. Producer Herb Alpert hears them sing. He is mesmerized by Karen's voice. They offer them a contract. Her first hit came quickly. They Long to Be Close to You, a Burt Bacharach cover that Karen transformed into emotional velvet. The song reached #1 on the Billboard charts. It was the summer of 1970. Karen was 20 years old, and the whole world fell in love with her voice. The following years were a whirlwind. We've Only Just Begun, Rainy Days and Mondays, Superstar, Goodbye to Love. Every song was a hit. Every record sold millions. The Carpenters became one of the most successful bands of the decade. But Karen faces a problem. No one takes her seriously as a drummer. The producers want her up front, as the vocalist, smiling and looking perfect. The drums are too masculine, too hidden. Gradually, Karen abandons the drumsticks and becomes what everyone expects, a beautiful voice without a visible body. 1975. Karen is at the height of her success, but something is eating away at her from the inside. The media constantly compares her appearance to other singers. Magazines publish photos where she looks different. Her mother, Agnes, makes casual comments about her figure. "You should take better care of yourself," she tells her during a family dinner. They are words that seem harmless, but they pierce like needles. Karen begins to restrict her diet. At first, it's small changes, fewer desserts, smaller portions. Then it becomes more extreme. She counts every calorie, avoids full meals, and exercises compulsively. She loses weight. The compliments start pouring in. "You look fantastic," they tell her. "You've lost so much weight." Every compliment is fuel for the fire. Richard notices something strange, but he's dealing with his own demons, a growing addiction to sleeping pills. The pressure of touring, recording, and maintaining their success is consuming them both. 1977. During a tour in Europe, Karen collapses on stage. Doctors diagnose physical exhaustion. But there's more to it. Her weight has dropped dangerously. Her menstrual periods have stopped. Her energy is almost non-existent. The doctors suggest rest. Karen agrees, but she can't stop. The success machine demands more albums, more performances, more smiles. She's the driving force of the duo, the voice everyone wants to hear. She can't fail, but her body begins to betray her. In interviews, Karen always looks radiant. She answers questions about her music, her inspirations, her future plans. But no one asks, "Are you okay?" No one sees the signs. Or perhaps everyone sees them, but no one knows what to do. By 1978, her weight had dropped to less than 100 pounds. Her face was sunken. Her bones were protruding. She wore baggy clothes to hide her figure. But it was impossible to completely conceal the devastation. It's 1980. Karen is in her New York apartment, alone. She looks at herself in the mirror. She sees a 30-year-old woman who looks 60. Her skin is pale. Her hair is falling out. Her heart beats irregularly. For the first time, she feels real fear. She calls her family. She cries on the phone. "I need help," she whispers. But the help she needs doesn't exist yet. Anorexia nervosa is barely understood. Treatments are experimental. Doctors are at a loss. Can anyone save her before it's too late? 1970. The A&M Record Studios in Los Angeles are a temple of sound. Here, Karen Carpenter spends entire days recording vocals. Herb Alpert, co-founder of the label, personally oversees the sessions. He knows he has something special on his hands, a voice that needs no studio tricks, that sounds perfect on the first take. Karen is a consummate professional. She arrives on time, prepared, and focused. She sings the same lines 20, 30 times until every note is exactly as she imagined it. Richard arranges the melodies, but it's Karen who brings them to life. She is the emotional heart of every song. But the studio is also a prison of expectations. Each album must be better than the last. Each song must be a hit. Success is addictive, but also relentless. In television interviews, the presenters always make the same comparison. "Are they the new Beatles?" they ask. Karen smiles politely. But the Carpenters face an image problem. In the midst of the heavy metal and counterculture era, they are seen as too clean, too sweet. Music critics despise them. They call them commercial sugar, supermarket music. Karen reads these reviews. Each one is a wound. She takes her music seriously, but the world seems to see her as a product, not an artist. There's another comparison that hurts even more, the comparison with other singers. Magazines publish photos of Karen alongside Olivia Newton-John, Barbra Streisand, Diana Ross. Who looks better? The headlines ask. Karen always feels she loses that competition. What few people know is that Karen feels more like herself behind the drums than in front of the microphone. When she plays, she's free. She doesn't have to worry about how she looks, only how she sounds. It's pure instinct, pure music. But the producers have other plans. "The public wants to see you," they tell her. "You're beautiful, you can't hide behind the drums." They hire professional drummers for the tours. Karen sings standing up, in elegant dresses, with perfect lighting. She agrees. She always agrees. Pleasing others is in her nature. But something inside her dies every time she puts down the drumsticks. 1972. Karen visits the family home in Downey between tours. Agnes prepares dinner: roast beef, mashed potatoes, vegetables. Karen eats little. Agnes notices. "You're not eating enough," Agnes says, but her tone isn't one of concern. It's critical. Agnes is a woman from another generation, where food is love but also control. She cooks to show affection, but she judges those who don't appreciate her efforts. The relationship between mother and daughter is complicated. Agnes openly adores Richard. She praises his talent, boasts about him to friends, and defends him against any criticism. With Karen, it's different. The love is there, but filtered through impossible expectations. "You could be thinner," Agnes tells her. "You should style your hair more." They're casual comments, but they accumulate like poison. Karen desperately seeks maternal approval, which never comes without conditions. 1973. The Carpenters are on a world tour. Japan, Australia, Europe. Every night, packed arenas. Every night, deafening applause. Karen smiles, waves, sings. But when she returns to her hotel, she collapses from exhaustion. There is no rest. The contracts are signed. The promoters wait. The record labels demand. Richard is just as exhausted, but he finds escape in pills, quaaludes to sleep, amphetamines to wake up. Karen doesn't take drugs. Her drug is control. Control over her body, over her food, over her weight. She starts carrying a portable scale. She weighs herself every morning. If the number goes up, even by half a kilo, she panics. She skips meals. She exercises in her room until the early hours of the morning. In 1978, Cherry Boone, daughter of singer Pat Boone, published a book, Starving for Attention. It was the first autobiographical book about anorexia nervosa written by a public figure. Cherry described her struggle, the obsession, the secrecy, the fear, the denial. Karen reads the book in private. It's like looking in a mirror. Each page describes her life. But instead of seeking help, Karen feels ashamed. "I'm not like that," she tells herself. "I'm in control. I'm fine." Denial is part of the illness. Anorexics don't see themselves as sick. They see themselves as successful, disciplined, and superior to those who lack control. 1978. The Carpenters released the album Made in America. It doesn't achieve the success of previous albums, but it contains gems. Karen is thinner than ever. In the promotional photos, the makeup barely hides her deterioration. Richard is on the verge of a breakdown because of his addiction. The recording sessions are tense. The brothers argue. Producer Jerry Moss notices the toxic dynamic but doesn't intervene. They're professionals, he thinks. They'll work it out. But some problems don't solve themselves. Despite her fame, Karen is deeply lonely. Her romantic relationships are few and far between, and ultimately unsuccessful. The men who approach her are interested in Karen Carpenter the star, not Karen the person. She longs for genuine love, a family of her own, and a normal life. But anorexia has robbed her of her fertility. Her menstrual periods stopped years ago. Her body is in survival mode, shutting down non-essential functions. Doctors warn her of irreversible damage, but she doesn't listen. 1979. Richard enters rehab for his pill addiction. It's a family scandal kept private. Karen publicly supports him, but inwardly she's terrified. If Richard can't work, what will become of the Carpenters? The terrifying answer: she is the brand. She is the voice. She could go on alone. But Karen has never been alone. She has always been one of the Carpenters, Richard's sister. Who is Karen without Richard? 1980. With Richard in rehab, Karen decides to record a solo album. It's an act of courage and rebellion. For the first time, she'll choose her own style, her own songs, her own artistic identity. She travels to New York. She works with producer Phil Ramone, famous for his work with Billy Joel. Karen is excited, terrified, and hopeful. But her body is failing. During recording sessions, she faints. Her voice, though still beautiful, has lost its power. The sound engineers look at her with concern. Will this album be their liberation or their swan song? 1979. Karen arrives in New York with suitcases full of hope. She rents an apartment on the Upper East Side. It is her first real act of independence. Far from California, far from her family, far from Richard. Phil Ramone, the legendary producer, welcomes her to the A&R studios. He sees beyond the sweet Carpenter's girl image. He wants to create something urban, more mature, closer to soul and jazz. Karen is nervous but excited. For the first time, someone is treating her as an individual artist, not as one half of a duo. The sessions start well. Karen records with New York musicians, jazz drummers, session bassists, sophisticated arrangers. The sound is different, rawer, more sensual. It's Karen unfiltered. Midway through the recordings, the phone rings in Karen's apartment. It's Richard. He's just gotten out of rehab. His voice sounds clear for the first time in years. But it also sounds upset. "What are you doing?" he asks. Karen explains her solo project. Silence on the other end of the line. Richard feels betrayed. He's the musical mastermind of the Carpenters. How dare Karen record without him? The record label isn't going to be happy, she warns. This affects the Carpenters. Karen tries to defend herself, but the guilt has already taken hold. She hangs up feeling dirty, as if she's committed a crime. During a late-night session, Karen is recording vocals. It's an emotional ballad. She reaches a high note and her voice cracks. She coughs. She tries again. Nothing. Her throat won't respond. Phil Ramone stops the recording. "Are you okay?" he asks. Karen nods, but she's not okay. Her body, deprived of nutrients for years, is paying the price. Her vocal muscles are weakening without protein. Her lungs are losing capacity without energy. Karen drinks some water, rests, and tries again. She manages to finish the song, but she knows something is wrong. Her greatest treasure, her voice, is in danger. After weeks of intense work, the album is finished. It's simply titled Karen Carpenter. 11 songs that showcase a different side of her. More mature, more vulnerable, more human. Phil Ramone is proud. Karen is terrified. They send the master tapes to A&M Records in Los Angeles. They await the executive's response. Karen returns to California for the meetings. Richard is there, recovered but distant. The A&M boardroom is cold. The executives listen to the album in silence. When it ends, their eyes meet. Jerry Moss, the co-founder, speaks first. It's different. It doesn't sound like a compliment. The decision is unanimous. A&M Records refuses to release the album. The arguments vary. It doesn't sound like the Carpenters. The public isn't ready for this, Karen. It's too commercially risky. Karen is devastated. She's poured her heart and soul into this project. It's her attempt to be seen as a complete artist, not just the pretty voice. But the industry doesn't want Karen the artist. It wants Karen the product. Richard tries to comfort her, but his words ring hollow. "There will be time for solo projects later," he says. "Now we must focus on the Carpenters." Karen nods mechanically. Inside, something dies. 1980. Without a solo album, without a clear purpose, Karen falls into a deep depression. Her weight, which had stabilized slightly in New York, drops again. She reaches 38 kilos. Her family organizes an intervention. They sit in the living room of the Downey house. Agnes cries. Harold is silent. Richard speaks. "You need professional help." Karen becomes furious. "I'm not sick. You don't understand anything." The denial is absolute. In her distorted mind, she's not too thin. She still sees fat where there are only bones. In the midst of her crisis, Karen meets Thomas Burris, a real estate entrepreneur 9 years her senior. It's a chance encounter at a dinner party. Thomas is polite, successful, and seemingly stable. Desperate for normalcy, Karen clings to him like a lifeline. They married on August 31st, 1980. The wedding was elegant at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Karen wore a white dress that hung on her skeletal frame. In the photos, her smile looked painted on. What Karen doesn't know is that Thomas has been hiding a crucial truth from her. He had a vasectomy years ago. He can't have children. He doesn't want children. And Karen, who dreams of being a mother, has just married a man who will never give her that family. The honeymoon in Europe is a disaster. Thomas is controlling, cold, and more interested in the status of being married to Karen Carpenter than in the real woman. They argue constantly. Karen calls her mother from a hotel in Paris. "I made a mistake," she cries. Agnes responds with brutal pragmatism. "You're married now. You have to make it work." There is no compassion, only duty. Karen returns to Los Angeles feeling more alone than ever. Finally, pressured by her family and alarmed doctors, Karen agrees to seek help. In 1982, she enters a treatment program in New York City run by psychologist Stephen Levenkron, one of the few specialists in eating disorders at the time. Levenkron works with Karen for months. It's a painful process: daily therapy, strict eating plans, constant confrontation with her mental distortions. Karen, for the first time, begins to understand that she is ill. She's slowly gaining weight. She reaches 50 kilos. Her face is regaining some color. There's hope. November 1982. Karen finishes her treatment with Levenkron. She feels better physically, but emotionally she is exhausted. She decides to divorce Thomas. It is a brave but draining decision. She returns to California to spend Thanksgiving with her family. She signs the divorce papers. She visits Richard, who is working on new songs for a possible Carpenters reunion. "I'm ready to go back," Karen tells him. Her voice sounds hopeful, fragile, brave. But her body holds a deadly secret. Years of abuse have left invisible damage. Her heart, deprived of essential nutrients, is irreversibly damaged. Will the treatment be enough to save her, or is it already too late? The Carpenter home in Downey is filled with Christmas lights. It's Christmas. Karen sits at the family table, surrounded by lavish dishes. She eats slowly, with effort, but she eats. Agnes watches her with a mixture of relief and distrust. Karen looks better than she did months ago. She's gained weight during her treatment in New York. Her cheeks have some color. But there's something fragile about her, like a newly repaired pane of glass that could shatter at the slightest bump. Richard plays Christmas carols on the piano. Karen hums. For a moment, everything seems normal, almost like in the old days, before fame, before the pain. But appearances can be deceiving. What no one knows is that the damage is already done. Years of severe malnutrition have affected Karen's heart muscle. Anorexia doesn't just destroy body fat and visible muscle. It also destroys the heart, a muscle that never rests, that works tirelessly every second of life. Karen's potassium levels are dangerously low. Chronic malnutrition has disrupted her electrolyte balance. Her heart beats irregularly. She feels occasional palpitations, but she ignores them. It's just anxiety, she tells herself. Doctors have warned her about the risks. But Karen, like many survivors of eating disorders, downplays the symptoms. "I'm getting better," she insists. The worst is over. January 1983. Karen meets with Richard at the recording studio. They are planning a new Carpenters album. It will be a triumphant return, a demonstration that their troubles are behind them. Richard has composed new songs. Karen listens to the demos with enthusiasm. Her voice is still beautiful, although it has lost some of its characteristic power. "I just need to practice more," she says. They're planning a summer tour. Promotional interviews. Television appearances. Everything is in place. The music world awaits the return of the Carpenters. But Karen's body has other plans. February 1st, 1983. Karen decides to spend a few days at her family home in Downey. She wants to be near her parents. She wants to feel safe. She arrives with suitcases full of clothes, but hardly eats. Agnes cooks her favorite dishes: meatloaf, mashed potatoes. Karen tries small bites, then pushes the plate away. "I'm not hungry," she says. Harold looks at her with concern. Agnes silently cleans the dishes, frustrated. The same old toxic dynamics persist. No one knows how to break the cycle. Karen sleeps in her old room. The walls are decorated with gold records, tour photos, mementos of an extraordinary career. But in the darkness, Karen feels alone. Immensely alone. It's Thursday. Karen wakes up early. She feels strangely weak. She goes downstairs for breakfast. Agnes is already in the kitchen making coffee. They exchange good mornings. Karen drinks only a glass of water. She leaves the house to run errands, a visit to her divorce lawyer, some minor shopping. She returns at noon, exhausted. She lies down on the living room sofa. Agnes covers her with a blanket. "Rest," she says. Karen closes her eyes. In the afternoon, she feels worse. Her heart is beating irregularly. She feels nauseous. She calls her mother. Something's not right. Agnes gives her a glass of water. "It's just stress from the divorce," she says. "It'll pass." Karen goes up to her room early. She goes to bed fully dressed. Night falls on Downey. It's 9 in the morning. Agnes goes upstairs to wake Karen. She knocks on the door. There's no answer. She knocks again. Silence. Agnes opens the door. Karen is lying on the closet floor. Her body is motionless. Agnes screams. Harold runs upstairs. They call 911. The minutes feel like an eternity. The paramedics arrive in 6 minutes. They attempt resuscitation. There is no pulse, no breathing. One of the paramedics checks the vital signs and shakes his head. Karen Carpenter was pronounced dead at 9:51 a.m. Preliminary cause, cardiac arrest. She was 32 years, 10 months, and 2 days old. The news reaches Richard by phone. He's at home, working on musical arrangements. He hears the words, but can't process them. Karen is dead. It doesn't make sense. They spoke yesterday. They were planning the album. This can't be real. She drives to her parents' house. The media is already outside. Cameras, reporters, microphones. Privacy evaporates. Inside the house, Agnes is in shock. Harold cries silently. Richard goes upstairs to Karen's room. Her belongings are untouched. Clothes in the closet, records on the shelf, a photo of the Carpenters in their prime. Everything is there, except Karen. The official autopsy was performed days later. Forensic examiners found a severely damaged heart. The cause of death was heart failure resulting from complications of anorexia and nervosa. But there's another finding: extremely low potassium levels, likely due to laxative and diet drug abuse. Karen had used ipecac syrup, an emetic, for years. Chronic ipecac use is cardiotoxic. The coroner's report states, emetine cardiotoxicity due to anorexia nervosa. It's a cold medical verdict for a hot human tragedy. The funeral was held on February 8, 1983, at Downey United Methodist Church. Thousands of people gathered outside. Inside, only family and close friends. The coffin is white, closed. The family decided that no one should see Karen's ravaged body. They prefer that the world remember her as she was: beautiful, smiling, talented. Richard reads a tribute. His voice breaks several times. Herb Alpert is present, weeping. Musicians, producers, childhood friends. They are all there, incredulous. They play a recording of Karen singing Ave Maria. Her voice fills the church like a beautiful ghost. There isn't a dry eye. Karen is buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Cypress, California. The headstone is simple: Karen Carpenter, 1950 to 1983, a star on earth, a star in heaven. In the days following the funeral, the world tries to understand what happened. Newspapers publish articles about anorexia nervosa, a term most people have never heard of. The Carpenter family receives thousands of letters. Some are condolences. Others are confessions. My daughter has the same thing, write desperate mothers. I didn't know it had a name, says a 17-year-old girl. Karen's death has opened a door. It has shed light on a silent epidemic that kills thousands every year. But will anything really change? Or will it just be another headline forgotten in weeks? The answer will surprise the world. March 1983. A month after Karen's death, the Carpenter family maintains public silence. They give no interviews. They make no detailed statements. Privacy is their shield. But the world doesn't remain silent. The media begins to investigate. What exactly killed Karen Carpenter? The words anorexia nervosa appear in national newspaper headlines. For millions of readers, it's the first time they've ever seen that term. Medical journals publish explanatory articles. News programs invite psychologists. Slowly, a disease that lived in the shadows is drawn into the public eye. Agnes Carpenter receives bags of mail. Thousands of letters arrive at Downey's house. Some are from devastated fans. Others are different. A mother writes from Ohio, "My daughter is 17 and hasn't eaten in weeks. I didn't know what to do until I read about Karen. Now I understand this is an illness." Another letter comes from a high school teacher. "I have 3 students showing the same signs. Where do I send them?" The letters reveal a chilling truth. Karen was not alone. Thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of young women struggle with the same disease. But until now, she had no public name, no famous face. Agnes reads the letters in private. She cries. For the first time, she understands the magnitude of what her daughter faced. April 1983. Richard Carpenter gives his first interview after Karen's death. He appears on the program Good Morning America. His face looks gaunt and aged. The interviewer asks directly, "Did you know Karen had anorexia?" Richard replies with painful honesty, "We knew something was wrong. We could see she was too thin, but we didn't understand the severity. We didn't know it was a mental illness, not just a diet problem." It's a public admission of ignorance, but it's also a call to action. If you see someone with these symptoms, seek professional help. Don't wait. Don't assume it will resolve itself. The interview goes viral in the context of 1983. It is played on evening news programs, quoted in newspapers, and discussed at family dinner tables. Karen's death acts as a catalyst. Hospitals in the United States begin opening clinics specializing in eating disorders. Universities launch research studies. The National Institute of Mental Health increases funding for research on anorexia and bulimia. Dr. Stephen Levenkron, who treated Karen in her final months, publishes academic articles about the case anonymously, but the community knows who he is. His findings are clear. Anorexia nervosa is not vanity. It is a serious psychiatric illness with a high mortality rate. Treatment protocols are improving. Clearer diagnostic criteria are being established. Specialized therapists are being trained. Karen's tragedy becomes the turning point for an entire branch of medicine. 6 years after Karen's death, CBS released the television movie The Karen Carpenter Story. Richards served as executive producer. It was his way of controlling the narrative, of ensuring that Karen was portrayed with dignity. The film, starring Cynthia Gibb, doesn't shy away from the truth. It depicts dysfunctional family dynamics, an obsession with weight, and physical collapse. Millions watch it. After the broadcast, phone lines at eating disorder clinics were overwhelmed. Thousands of people called seeking help. The film had struck a national chord. Anorexia is no longer a shameful secret. It is a recognized public health crisis. In 1989, A&M Records finally released Karen's solo album, which had been rejected years earlier. Titled Karen Carpenter, it came with a warning. This is the work Karen wanted the world to hear. Critics praise it. It's mature, it's honest, it's Karen unfiltered, writes Rolling Stone. Sales are modest, but respectable. More importantly, the album serves a purpose. It validates Karen as an individual artist, not just one half of a duo. Richard listens to the album in private. He cries. He finally understands that he should have supported his sister when she needed him most. The 1990s brought a new generation of artists who cited Karen as an influence. Sheryl Crow, Shania Twain, Madonna, and even R&B artists like Mary J. Blige all mentioned Karen's vocal purity. But they also bring a new wave of awareness. Artists like Alanis Morissette and Fiona Apple speak openly about body image pressure, eating disorders, and mental health. The conversation Karen began with her death continues with the voices of those still living. In 1994, during the Grammy Awards, there was a special tribute to Karen Carpenter. Babyface performed Close to You. The cameras captured Richard in the audience, crying. Agnes Carpenter, who for years maintained a rigid silence about Karen's illness, finally spoke out in 1996. She gave an interview to a health magazine. I didn't understand, she admits. I thought it was stubbornness. I thought I could reason with her to eat. I didn't know it was a mental illness. Tears well up in her eyes. If I could go back, I would do everything differently. It is a partial redemption. Late. Imperfect. But significant. Agnes died in 1996. At her funeral, Richard read a letter Karen had written to him but never sent. In it, Karen expressed her love but also her pain at her mother's lack of approval. It is a painful but necessary moment of closure. By the year 2000, anorexia nervosa was recognized worldwide as a serious illness. The World Health Organization included treatment protocols in its guidelines. European, Asian, and Latin American countries established specialized clinics. It is estimated that Karen's death saved thousands of lives by forcing a global conversation about eating disorders. Retrospective studies show that early diagnosis rates increased dramatically after 1983. More early diagnoses mean more successful interventions. The year is 2010. The Carpenters' music is experiencing a resurgence. A new generation is discovering We've Only Just Begun and Rainy Days and Mondays through movies, commercials, and streaming services. But they also discover Karen's story. Documentary videos on YouTube accumulate millions of views. Online forums discuss her legacy. One question keeps coming up. What would Karen have accomplished if she had lived? She would have been 60 in 2010. She could have had a successful solo career. She could have mentored new artists. She could have used her platform to advocate for mental health. The world will never know exactly what it lost. But she does know this. Karen Carpenter died so that others could live. March 1983. Richard Carpenter sits at the piano in his home. The keys are covered in dust. He hasn't played music since the funeral. The silence is deafening. Guilt consumes him. He mentally replays every sign he ignored, every conversation he avoided. Could he have saved her? Should he have confronted her more aggressively? The questions swirl in his head, unanswered. Richard is also battling his own health. His addiction to pills nearly killed him. Now, sober, he must live with the brutal clarity of what he's lost. There are no pills to numb this pain. From childhood, Richard and Karen were musically inseparable. He composed, she performed. He thought, she felt. They were two halves of a perfect whole. But that perfection came at a cost. Richard was always the brains, Karen the voice. He received credit for arrangements and composition. She received admiration for her performance. But the industry, the family, even they themselves, reinforced rigid roles. Karen longed to be taken seriously as a complete musician, songwriter, drummer, producer. Richard longed for recognition as an artist beyond Karen Carpenter's brother. None of them got what they wanted. Success pigeonholed them. In 1984, Richard begins intensive therapy. His therapist asks him difficult questions. What was your relationship with Karen really like? Richard responds with rehearsed versions. We were very close. We understood each other perfectly. But the therapist presses. Was there resentment? Silence. Finally, Richard admits uncomfortable truths. Sometimes I felt like I was living in her shadow. She was the visible star. I was the invisible operator. She also admits the other side. And I think she felt controlled. I decided everything musically. I never gave her space to grow on her own. They are painful but liberating admissions. To understand Richard and Karen, we must understand Agnes and Harold. Agnes was domineering, critical, and impossible to please. Harold was passive, avoided conflict, and hid behind newspapers. Agnes idealized Richard from the moment he was born. He was her hope, her legacy, her pride. Karen was the other daughter. Loved, yes, but never with the intensity that Richard received. Richard grew up with crushing expectations. Karen grew up seeking crumbs of approval. Both patterns were toxic. In therapy, Richard reflects, my mother put too much pressure on me. She didn't give Karen enough validation. Both of those things hurt us. In 1985, Richard attempted a return to music. A&M Records suggested he compile unreleased Carpenters material. Richard immersed himself in the stored master tapes. Find recordings of Karen that were never released. Bare vocals, without full arrangements. It's like listening to a ghost singing from the past. Richard cries as he listens. Karen's voice, preserved on magnetic tape, is perfect, but the woman who possessed it is dead. He released the album Voice of the Heart in October 1983. It was a moderate success, but for Richard, it was torture. Every song was a reminder of what he had lost. Richard marries his cousin Mary Rudolph in 1984. It is an attempt to create normality, to build a life beyond the tragedy. They have 5 children over the years. Richard becomes a devoted father, but also an overprotective one, especially with his daughters. He obsessively monitors their eating habits. Any sign of restriction terrifies him. Her children are growing up knowing Aunt Karen, only through photos and recordings. Richard tells them stories, how she was funny, talented, generous. But he also warns them, mental illness is real. If you ever feel like you're struggling, tell me. Throughout the 80s and 90s, Richard participated in countless tributes to Karen, television programs, documentaries, memorial concerts. Each time, he had to tell the story. Each time, he had to smile for the cameras. It's exhausting. Public shaming leaves no room for complexity. Interviewers want feel-good stories, not painful truths. In 1994, during a tribute at the Grammys, Richard broke down on stage. He tried to speak, but couldn't. The producer cut to a commercial break. Backstage, Richard breaks down in tears. I can't keep doing this, he says. He takes a 2-year break from public appearances. In 1998, while cleaning the attic of the family home in Downey, Richard finds boxes of Karen's belongings, clothes, diaries, and unsent letters. Read the diaries. Karen wrote about her pain, her loneliness, her desperation to be seen. She wrote about feeling inadequate, about hating herself physically, about wanting to disappear. Richard never knew that these thoughts tormented his sister. She was an expert at hiding her inner suffering. He also finds letters Karen wrote but never sent. One is addressed to him. In it, Karen expresses love but also frustration. "Sometimes I feel like I'm just your instrument, not your sister." Richard keeps the letter in his wallet. He carries it with him for years as a reminder of what he didn't see. The year is 2005. Richard is 58 years old. More than 2 decades have passed since Karen's death. He finally finds something resembling peace. He accepts that he couldn't save her. He accepts that he made mistakes. He accepts that the family dynamic was toxic, but it was also all they knew. He released a definitive Carpenters compilation, Gold, Greatest Hits. The album includes extensive liner notes where Richard speaks candidly about Karen, her illness, and her legacy. Sales are massive. New generations are discovering the music. Older generations are rediscovering memories. The year is 2020. Richard is 73 years old. He lives quietly in California with his family. He occasionally gives interviews, but mostly enjoys retirement. In an interview for a music podcast, he is asked, "What would you say to Karen if you could talk to her today?" Richard reflects silently. Then he replies, "I would tell her that I hear her now, that I understand her pain now, and that I regret not having fully seen her when she was alive." She pauses. She continues, "But I would also tell her that her death was not in vain. Thousands of people are alive today because she forced the world to pay attention to this disease." It's a bittersweet truth. Karen died, but her legacy saves lives. Richard will end his days knowing this. He loved his sister imperfectly, as we all love imperfectly. But his love lives on in every note she sang, in every life her story saved. 1970. America is obsessed with thinness. Fashion magazines promote increasingly slender models. Twiggy, the British supermodel, weighs 41 kilos and is 1.67 meters tall. She is the aspirational image. Diets have become a massive industry. Weight Watchers, Slim Fast, weight loss pills sold without a prescription. Television bombards us with commercials promising miraculous transformations. For young women, the message is clear. Your worth is in your appearance. And the right appearance is thin, thin, thin. Karen Carpenter grew up in this context. It's not just personal vanity. It's systemic cultural pressure. In the music industry of the 70s, men were judged on talent. Women were judged on looks first, talent second. Mick Jagger may be haggard from drugs, and he's a real rocker. Karen is haggard from illness, and she's unprofessional. Television producers demand that Karen wear tight dresses, show more skin, and smile constantly. She is packaged as a product as much as an artist. Other examples abound. Mama Cass Elliot, the incredible voice of the mamas and the papas, is constantly ridiculed for her weight. Critics describe her physique before mentioning her talent. She dies young in 1974, and cruel rumors about choking on a sandwich haunt her memory, even though they are false. The Carpenter family reflects the cultural attitudes of their time. Agnes, raised in the 1930s and 40s, learned that women should be perfect, good wives, good mothers, and physically presentable. She projects these expectations onto Karen. Casual comments about weight aren't malicious. They're helpful. Agnes genuinely believes she's guiding her daughter toward success. Harold, the silent father, represents passive complicity. He doesn't criticize directly, but he doesn't defend either. His silence is permission for the toxic dynamics to continue. Richard, focused on music, doesn't see the signs. Or he doesn't want to see them. It's easier to ignore what's uncomfortable. The family isn't a villain. It's a product of its time. But that doesn't make the harm any less real. In 1975, when Karen began to lose weight dramatically, her family doctor failed to identify anorexia. Why? Because most general practitioners are not trained in psychiatric disorders. Anorexia nervosa has existed as a diagnosis since the 19th century, but it is seen as a rare disease of eccentric Victorian women, not as a modern epidemic. Karen's doctors treat symptoms. They give her vitamins, recommend she eat more, and suggest she reduce stress. None of them identify the underlying psychiatric issue until it's too late. This medical failure is not unique. Thousands of cases went unnoticed in the 70s and 80s. A&M Records, the Carpenters' record label, is complicit in Karen's tragedy. Not intentionally, but through negligence. The executives notice Karen's physical decline. Herb Alpert, co-founder, sees her collapse during sessions. Jerry Moss observes her extreme thinness. But no one intervenes professionally. Why? Because the music industry normalizes the suffering of artists. Exhausting tours, impossible pressures, emotional exploitation, they're part of the business. Furthermore, Karen is a cash cow. The Carpenters generate millions. Shutting down the machine so Karen can recover would mean financial losses. The artist's health is secondary to the company's profits. In the 1970s, mental health was taboo. Depression was seen as weakness. Anxiety was dismissed as nerves. Eating disorders were labeled as excessive vanity. People struggling with these illnesses often hide. Seeking psychiatric help carries a social stigma. You're going to a psychiatrist? Are you crazy? Karen internalizes this stigma. Even when she agrees to treatment in 1982, she does so secretly in New York, far from California, where the paparazzi might discover her. Social silence kills as much as the disease itself. Karen Carpenter's death doesn't change the world immediately. Culture doesn't transform in days, but it plants seeds. In 1984, magazines like People and Time published extensive articles on anorexia. Television programs like 2020 investigated the epidemic among teenagers. Schools are beginning to integrate education on healthy body image. Universities are launching prevention programs. The entertainment industry is slowly beginning to acknowledge its responsibility. Some studios are implementing policies against public criticism of artists' bodies. It's glacial progress, but it's progress. Despite growing awareness, anorexia persists. In the 1990s, supermodel Kate Moss popularized the heroin chic aesthetic, extremely thin, gaunt, and pale. New generations of young people are developing eating disorders. The names change: Aaliyah, Amy Winehouse, Brittany Murphy. They all die young, some with eating disorders as contributing factors. The lesson hasn't been fully learned. The culture still values extreme thinness. The year is 2010. Social media is transforming activism. The body positivity movement is gaining momentum. Hashtags like #bodypositive and #health@every-size are going viral. Artists like Lizzo, Adele, before her weight loss, and Meghan Trainor challenge traditional standards. They speak openly about body image pressure, self-esteem, and mental health. It's the conversation Karen started unintentionally. 30 years later, it finally blossoms. The year is 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic brings a new mental health crisis. Cases of eating disorders among teenagers skyrocket. Isolation, anxiety, and control are all contributing factors. Specialized clinics report waiting lists of months. Crisis hotlines are overwhelmed. But there is also hope. Technology allows for virtual therapy, online support communities, and mental health apps. Karen Carpenter died in 1983 because society wasn't ready to save her. The tools didn't exist. Understanding was primitive. Would he have survived if he had been born 30 years later? Possibly. The question is painful but important. His death was not in vain. It was the cry that finally made the world listen. The year is 2025. The city of Downey, California, has changed. But some places remain. The house where Karen Carpenter spent her last days still exists. It's private property, but fans occasionally drive by and take pictures from the sidewalk. Downey High School, where Karen discovered the drums, has a commemorative plaque in her honor. Current students walk past it without knowing who she was. But some teachers still tell her story in music classes. Forest Lawn Memorial Park, where Karen is buried, receives visitors regularly. They leave flowers, letters, drumsticks. Some cry. Others simply sit in silence. Karen's memory lives on in these physical spaces. But it also lives on in something more powerful: her music. The Carpenters' songs have sold over 100 million copies worldwide. On modern streaming platforms, they have accumulated hundreds of millions of plays. Why do they endure? Because they're timeless. We've Only Just Begun is played at weddings every weekend. Rainy Days and Mondays comforts people on gray days. Close to You makes grandparents and teenagers alike smile. Karen's voice has a unique quality: absolute sincerity. When she sings about love, you believe she knows love. When she sings about loneliness, you feel her pain. It wasn't acting. It was emotional truth distilled into musical notes. In Japan, Karen Carpenter is revered as a legend. The Carpenters had massive success in Asia, and decades later, new generations of Japanese are discovering their music. In Brazil, his songs are karaoke standards. In the Philippines, covers of Superstar are wedding rituals. Thousands of people around the world grew up hearing her voice without knowing her story. When they discover how she died, they weep as if they've lost a friend. 42 years after her death, anorexia nervosa still has no definitive cure, but treatments have advanced exponentially. Cognitive behavioral therapy, developed and refined in the 1980s and 1990s, shows significant success rates. Specialized centers combine psychiatry, nutrition, and family therapy. Doctors now understand that anorexia is a biopsychosocial illness, genetic, psychological, and cultural simultaneously. There is no simple solution because there is no single cause. Researchers cite the case of Karen Carpenter in academic studies. Her death is documented in medical textbooks as an example of cardiac complications from chronic anorexia. She unwittingly became a case study that saved future lives. Richard Carpenter is 78 years old. He lives quietly, away from the public eye. His children are successful adults. His grandchildren visit him regularly. She occasionally gives interviews for documentaries or podcasts. She always speaks of Karen with love, with sadness, with acceptance. In 2022, A&M Records released a massive remaster of the Carpenters catalog. Richard personally oversaw every detail. It was his last major professional project. "It's my way of keeping her alive," she said in an interview. As long as her music is playing, Karen isn't really dead. In online forums dedicated to eating disorder recovery, Karen Carpenter's name comes up frequently. People share how her story saved their lives. "I read about it when I was 16 and weighed 35 kilos, one woman writes. "I was scared. I sought help. Now I'm 30 and healthy." Another person shares, "My therapist showed me a documentary about Karen. Seeing someone so talented die from this made me realize it wasn't vanity. It was a real illness." There are no precise statistics on how many lives Karen's death indirectly saved, but anecdotal accounts suggest thousands. Pop culture continues to reference Karen Carpenter. In television series, films, and books, her name appears as a symbol of talent destroyed by impossible pressures. In 2010, the TV series Glee performed a musical tribute to the Carpenters. In 2015, Lady Gaga mentioned Karen in an interview about image pressures in the industry. In 2020, during the pandemic, Rainy Days and Mondays experienced a viral resurgence on TikTok. 17-year-olds rediscovered the song, created melancholic videos, and shared them with millions. Karen reached new audiences 40 years after her death. In 2025, eating disorders were still an epidemic. Social media has complicated the situation. Filters that alter appearance, influencers promoting extreme diets, and constant social comparison. But there are also new tools, mental health apps, virtual support communities, viral educational campaigns. The conversation Karen initiated with her death continues to evolve. It wasn't resolved. Perhaps it never will be fully resolved. But it lives on. It's a speculative exercise, but an unavoidable one. What would Karen have achieved if she had survived? She would have been 75 in 2025. She could have continued recording music in the 80s and 90s. She could have reinvented herself as a solo artist. She could have mentored new singers. Perhaps she would have used her platform to advocate for mental health. She could have been a spokesperson for eating disorder organizations. Her testimonies could have directly saved lives. Or perhaps she would have chosen privacy, a quiet house, a family, peace away from fame. We'll never know. That's the enduring tragedy. It's midnight somewhere in the world. In a dark room, someone is going through a difficult time, a breakup, a loss, a hard day. They seek solace in music. They press play on Superstar by the Carpenters. Karen Carpenter's voice fills the space. Warm as an embrace, sad as a memory, beautiful as a promise. The lyrics speak of longing and loss. The listener feels understood. It doesn't matter that Karen died 42 years ago. In that moment, she is alive. Her voice is a real presence, tangible comfort. This scene is repeated 1,000 times a day in 1,000 different places. Each repetition is a small resurrection. Karen Carpenter is still singing. Her voice never truly fell silent. And as long as someone, somewhere, finds solace in that voice, his life was not in vain. His death, though tragic, changed the world for the better. The girl from Downey who just wanted to play the drums became the voice that saved thousands of lives. That is his legacy. That is his gift to the world. Their music continues. Their story continues. Their impact continues. Karen Carpenter, a star on earth, a star in the sky, a voice that never, ever falls silent.